no nukes, no terrorists, no missiles. Okay, we just talked about that right there. They clearly still have missiles. In fact, our own supply has been depleted.
Bring the UAE closer to us.
Our own supply has been depleted by 1/3 to one half.
Because we have a ceasefire.
Progressive commentator Adam Mockler joined Abby Phillips' panel to challenge the familiar lineup of MAGA defenders and confront several far-right talking points head-on. The discussion quickly turned tense as competing narratives collided on live television. We're going to break down key moments from that exchange, including Mockler's pushback, the reactions from the rest of the panel, and what the larger political message reveals. I'll also add my own perspective throughout. Let's get into the clips and unpack what really happened.
Tonight, explosive new reporting severely undercutting President Trump's claims about Iran's missile capabilities. According to the New York Times, assessments show that Iran has restored operational access to 30 of the 33 missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz, which could threaten U.S. warships and oil tankers. Only 3 of the missile sites are totally inaccessible. The Times also notes that Iran still has about 70% of its mobile launchers and has retained another 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile. And as the war drags on, even some of the biggest hawks are beginning to lose patience.
I don't trust Pakistan as far as I can throw them. If they actually do have Iranian aircraft parked in Pakistan bases to protect Iranian military assets, that tells me we should be looking maybe for somebody else to mediate. No wonder this damn thing is going nowhere.
When this war started, we heard 3 or 4 different things. No missiles, no nukes, no terrorists, and maybe regime change. That's what he was going for. Regime change has not happened. The IRGC is still in control. It's not going to happen. The IRGC is so deeply embedded. The IRGC is in Iran, and they're in charge. They are so deeply embedded in Iran's institutions that you can't just get them out unless you go boots on the ground. Who's in control right now? The IRGC. Number 2, on no nukes. What they did was scatter the scientists around the country and put all of the blueprints into the cloud, so it still exists. Yes, the nuclear is, the enriched uranium is buried under rubble, but it's still in Iran. They can just rebuild, get the info from the cloud, and then rebuild again. So that takes me to no terrorism. They can still fund terrorism. They'll likely get money from this deal, and the Strait of Hormuz will likely be told 3 months from now. So they're going to keep taking money. What was the last one? No nukes, no terrorists, no missiles. Okay, we just talked about that right there. They clearly still have missiles. In fact, our own supply has been depleted.
Bring the UAE closer to us.
Our own supply has been depleted by 1/3 to one half.
Because we have a ceasefire.
Captain Eyebrows claims nobody is truly in charge and that the leadership is nothing more than cardboard figures. But if that were true, how exactly are those same nobodies maintaining control of a critical strategic waterway? If the opposition is as weak and directionless as described, then why hasn't any outside power simply walked in and taken over already? That contradiction exposes the flaw in the argument. You cannot describe an enemy as powerless while simultaneously treating them as an unstoppable threat. Both claims cannot stand at the same time.
Because they successfully convinced Trump that they're at a negotiating table, and yet it's been a month and there's been no deal. Actually, several of you brought this up. Who are they negotiating with, and what is the actual strategy? The son of Iran's last Shah just spoke earlier, and he says there are too many mixed messages coming out of this White House. Listen.
You have to have a clear message. You have to have a clear strategy of aiming for putting an end to this regime, allowing for people to revolt, allowing for elements within the military and security forces to defect and join with the people. All of that has to be coordinated as a coherent strategy. You cannot send mixed signals. On the one hand, say people need to rise, and at the same time say, wait, we are negotiating. It's confusing the hell out of everyone.
And you can't rely on it. And like you said, who are we negotiating with? A cardboard cutout? That does not look good for the president.
Well,
I have to give credit to Ashley Allison for this one. It was a sharp line and it landed perfectly. Her point was simple. Donald Trump presents himself as a master negotiator, yet somehow he struggles even when dealing with what critics describe as cardboard cutouts. That kind of remark cuts through the branding and highlights the gap between image and reality.
One of the earliest signs, Elizabeth,
eliminated everybody else.
But actually, that's exactly what I was going to ask you about, because one of the earliest signs of a potential miscalculation from the administration was that they acknowledged that all the people that they thought they could potentially work with, they had killed. And so when you start the conflict saying that, oh, actually, we eliminated all the people that maybe we could talk to, and now we don't even know who's running the country, isn't that a bad sign that they're not really sure how this is going to go?
I mean, I will never say it's a bad sign if those that want Americans murdered are no longer on the face of the earth. I'm never going to think that. And I think, look, you brought up amazing points.
They keep returning to the same talking point, that Americans are constantly under threat and danger is everywhere. Then they repeat the usual slogans to stir fear and urgency. But many ordinary people do not experience life through that lens. If someone has lived for decades without ever feeling directly threatened by Iran, then clearly that issue is not at the top of their daily concerns. For most Americans, the immediate worries are far closer to home. Rising costs, crime, healthcare bills, housing pressure, and economic stress. Those realities feel more personal than distant geopolitical warnings.
Americans can point to thus far that we can say, hey, this is going to end tomorrow. Of course, people are worried, people are panicked. At the same time, everything you mentioned is still worth it if we make sure they can never have a nuclear weapon. It is very easy to sit here when we're all still on the face of the earth and we're all here and America's as strong as possible. But it's not that easy to say if, God forbid, they throw that bomb at us. We have no idea what could happen.
Just clarify what the Iranian regime is. It's not one person. It's not their navy. It's not their air force. It is the Islamic. It is the IRGC. The IRGC Navy absolutely does exist. That's why the Strait is still closed. But the IRGC is deeply embedded within the institutions, and former IRGC members actually inhabit the banks, colleges, all the institutions within Iran, and they have an incentive to never let their power go because they were seen committing awful acts. So
right.
you have
they're built for this moment. The IRGC is absolutely built for this moment. And this is something that I think the president, let me just say, I think the president is used to dealing with other transactional individuals and even other transactional countries, frankly, like China. This is an ideology.
It's not simply that Donald Trump prefers dealing with transactional personalities. The bigger issue is that he built his reputation in environments where intimidation often worked in his favor. In business disputes, he could delay payments, drag matters through court, and rely on greater financial resources to outlast smaller opponents. Many people lacked the money or time to fight back. But countries do not operate like private contractors. Nations cannot be bullied the same way a vendor can. That is the weakness in the businessman president myth, especially when the record includes bankruptcies, failed ventures, and a carefully marketed image that exceeded the reality. The legend of the art of the deal sounded impressive, but critics argue the real formula was often leverage, delay, and refusing to pay.
They'll take all the pain.
And one agreement does not kill an ideology. And so even if we come to an agreement and they say we will not build nuclear weapons, the next day they can start again.
Why did we celebrate Obama's deal?
That's right.
I'm not saying Obama's deal was perfect, but at least it's steps forward. What I'm saying is that you're not going to bomb out an ideology unless you eliminate a whole country, and I think we all would say that.
What you can do to de-radicalize is oftentimes integrate a country into the global economy, and that's what the nuclear deal did. We integrated Iran, we had oversight in Iran, and it was better than whatever the hell we had.
And we delayed their ability to get a nuclear weapon to strike the United States of America.
Personally, I think the broader issue is nuclear weapons themselves, not just which country possesses them. A safer world would involve fewer nations holding that kind of destructive power. At the same time, many countries pursue nuclear capability because they view it as deterrence. When powerful nations already maintain large arsenals and frequently intervene abroad, others may see such weapons as protection rather than aggression. I'm skeptical of claims that possession automatically means imminent attack. In many cases, the opposite logic applies. Countries with deterrence are sometimes less likely to be targeted in the first place.
About this with you on the show for several months now at this point, and we have been told that by this point they would have to capitulate, that the blockade alone would force them to the negotiating table. That really has not happened. And not only that, but they're rebuilding their missile capabilities. They still have all the nuclear material in their possession. So, as Adam often asks, what are we getting from all of this bombing?
Well, we might get more bombing if they actually do get close to what the New York Times is reporting. I mean, obviously the White House has pushed back on some of the claims about their capabilities and their access. I think one can reasonably look at how they're acting right now, and they're certainly not using those missile sites at this point. If they do in fact have access to it, I think the president doesn't want to get involved more so militarily. He's giving them every opportunity. The blockade is in fact working. Their economy is weakened. It's going to take some time, and I think that's the one thing that the president, just from a messaging standpoint, is in a really tough spot. He's not going to come out and say this is going to take 6 months, or you cannot put that kind of, you cannot put that kind of timeline on any of this, because you're basically telling the enemy that all you have to do is wait this out for X amount of time. So politically that puts him in a tough spot. But as I've said, and I do think that this is bearing out as truth, he's willing to take political hits because he thinks what's happening now, the end goal, is the right thing. And I agree that
he appears willing to absorb political damage because he often seems unaware of the consequences of his own decisions. Instead of acting with strategy or discipline, Many moves come across as impulsive, reactive, and poorly thought through. That creates chaos, not confidence. When leadership lacks competence, the public usually pays the price.
Or not, it's worth it. The pain that the American people are feeling, we should be having that conversation. It's important to have that conversation. He's taken a stance, and now the response is going to be political.
The problem is, you said he can't say 6 months or a year, but he did. He said a week. Like everything you're saying he can't do, he already has done, and he's done it incorrectly. And so then that makes people feel confused. And then you get reporting, you hear in June that their stockpile was under rubble. Like, well, just no, he didn't say under rubble. He said it was basically eliminated. Obliterate, thank you. That reporting doesn't match up. So I think the American people actually agree, you and I agree, and probably everyone at this table, that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. Yeah. And I think if the president from the very beginning was more honest and said, we're committed to this until the end, and not put premature, unnecessary, or just ambitious deadlines that we all knew were false, and said, and you know what, Americans, I need you to go with me on this, because you will experience some pain, but I am committed. But he hasn't done that.
He said it's fine.
Sure, that's what we're here for.
So, had he said that from the beginning, would any of the reaction from folks on the left, his critics, been any different than what it is now?
Probably not, but at least he would be acting with some integrity and honesty. Right now, if you don't believe in the war, maybe you don't believe in the war, but I think that right now, he's talking out of two sides of his mouth, and so it is much easier for me to be a lot critical of him because he's being inconsistent.
But here's the thing. I mean, I think it feels to me like it's a lot simpler than this. You just said that at least he took a stance. Well, it seems like the stance that he took may have been a massive miscalculation. And if that is the case, that's a leadership test.
Yeah.
Leaders either make good decisions or they make bad decisions. And it's possible that right now we are living through a bad decision and the consequences of it.
In the end, I don't fully agree that changing the messaging would have changed the outcome. Even if officials led with, "We must stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons," many Americans have heard that style of argument too many times before. The public remembers repeated conflicts sold as necessary, urgent, and unavoidable. From Vietnam War to Iraq War to war in Afghanistan, people have seen the costs in money, lives, and long-term instability. That history shapes how new military actions are received. A large share of voters now question endless intervention. They do not want trillions more spent, more troops placed at risk, or more civilians caught in conflicts with no clear benefit. They also do not want profits flowing to defense interests while ordinary people struggle economically. That is why panel spin and television theatrics may not move public opinion much. If fuel prices rise, markets shake, and families feel financial pain, support can erode quickly. No amount of smirking or dismissive reactions on Abby Phillips' show will erase that reality. So what do you think? Are the MAGA panelists making a convincing case? Or do voices like Adam Mockler and Ashley Allison better reflect where the public stands?